All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Tennis Channel Inside In on the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Mitch Michals, as always, from the Santa Monica studios into October. This 2023 season still continuing on. A special guest on this week's show, 15 years as a tennis player, became the first American to do a lot of things in wheelchair tennis, including win a major, Wimbledon 2022, which we'll get into her career, her story, her very inspiring story. It's Dana Mathewson on Tennis Channel Inside In. Dana, I was looking forward to this chat. Thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
Yeah, we have a lot to kind of get to with your career, your journey. There's a lot to be said, the pioneer aspect of it, how successful you've made yourself. And I know a lot of this story goes back to your childhood, the journey, everything you've been through. Before everything went down, what would you describe your active life? I know it's San Diego. You were the typical kid. You played a lot of sports. Tennis wasn't even really on the radar. What was
Right.
your life like as a kid in San Diego growing up in this active lifestyle?
Oh man. I mean, I think if you asked like 7 or 8-year-old me, I would have been like, oh, it's boring, blah, blah, blah. But now when I look back, I'm like, yeah, I had a great childhood, like growing up in a place where you can be outside all the time because the weather is like perfect. My brother and I were always playing out in the backyard and, like we weren't really inside kids in terms of like wanting to hang out by the TV and kind of like lounge around. We were always doing something. My mom had us in a lot of extracurriculars, so even if it wasn't sports related, we were doing like piano lessons or like art class or stuff like that. So, yeah, I had a great childhood. I think there was always something to do.
So when you got to the point where it was, picking sports, what was it about soccer that made you want to play that game?
I don't know. Actually, no one's ever asked me that. That's a great question. Um, I think I very much gravitated towards the team aspect of it. I think when you're young, you kind of want to do whatever your friends are doing. And a lot of my best friends were playing soccer. And so it just kind of seemed like where I wanted to be. And then it turned out to be a sport that I just really liked playing. I played defense, and I think there was just something about like defending something, doing it with my friends. Like I just loved it. I loved soccer for that reason. I didn't really give a lot of other sports a chance, if I'm honest, which I think is probably why I never really took to tennis, is because I was like, I already have my sport. I don't care. So maybe I would have liked other sports, but soccer was just kind of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And I think it speaks to, some of the people that are the best tennis players are the late bloomers. They don't specialize early. That's a whole nother thing. I don't want to get into that right
My
away
gosh, no, we
because,
could talk about that for sure.
and I know this is, there's the big moment in your life that kind of, changed everything. And you were 10 years old when this happened, when you had the issue problem with your legs. And then unfortunately the hand you were dealt with what went on past that. But what I've always admired about your story from afar is just how honest and upfront you are, how you embrace it, but also how your positivity shines through. You look at it in such a positive way that it could have been way worse. Like the
Yeah.
first thing that struck me was that it could have been fatal. So you not only did not have that happen, but still handled it and still had the outcome that was much better than it could have been. How are you able at such a young age to have such positivity?
Um, I don't know. I think part of that is just maybe my genetic makeup and how I am. I think I've always been like a really stubborn kid, which a lot of times being told that you're stubborn is seen in a negative light. And I think a lot of times it's definitely not a great trait to have. But I think for athletes and for people that are going through times of adversity, being stubborn is one of the best things that you can be. For me, as a 10-year-old, I didn't fully understand that, like, oh, all of a sudden I'm paralyzed and I'm not going to walk the way that I used to or walk at all. Like, that was hard for me to understand. And then I think once I started to understand it, it was kind of like, well, no, I'm not going to accept that. And that was like my stubbornness kicking in. And I think that I was just so lucky to be surrounded by friends and family that didn't treat me any differently. So then I still felt like me, if that makes sense. Like, because I think that can go really one of two ways after an injury happens, especially to a young person, where they can immediately started to be treated with quote unquote kid gloves. And that immediately makes you feel like, oh my gosh, I am fragile. Oh my gosh, I can't do a lot of things. And then I think your personality kind of changes to fit that. And with my family, like the second that I got home, my mom told me to do chores. Like I was just seen as still Dana, and I was still pushed to be athletic and still pushed to do everything that I was doing prior to my injury. I just wasn't using my legs. And I think that that forced me to see this as not so much a tragedy, but just as like an obstacle that I had to find a way to live with and accept.
Being able to process it as a kid, that's a very underrated point. I don't think a lot of people quite understand. And your support system, it seems like it means everything. Your parents, how great that they've been to you, the ability to get the best medical care on not only that time, but going forward.
Yeah.
Could you talk to me a little bit about that support system, not just your parents, but all the people that helped you get through this difficult process and pushed you to not just, accept fate and be sad, to keep going and live your best life?
Yeah, I mean, the big part was my mom. My dad was still kind of in the picture at that point, but my mom was really like the driving force behind um everything, whether that be like being with me in the hospital. Again, I was only 10 years old, so my mom was staying overnight with me for the entirety of the month that I was living in the hospital. And I had a brother that was at home, and he was, staying with my dad, and my mom literally just like stayed with me and was like my rock, and I knew that I could count on her for like kind of like, it's like you're hearing doctors talk and all this jargon that you don't understand. And my mom was like a translator to me almost. So it was like I had her there as a mom, but also as my doctor. And that was like a huge sense of comfort. My grandma was also there. My grandma's unfortunately no longer with us, but she was probably the biggest example of being positive in a storm. Like she
Mhm.
had so many things happen to her in her lifetime, but literally always had a smile on her face, was always making it a priority to make other people happy. And I think my mom learned that from her, and then I learned that from my mom. So those two women were huge. And then I've just been really lucky to have, since then, coaches that have always pushed me to be better, friends that were always really supportive of me. And like I said before, just always treated me the same. I've never been made to feel less than by my community or my core group of people. And I think that's honestly been the biggest reason why I've set lofty goals for myself, or like had the audacity maybe to dream as big as I feel like I have.
Yeah.
As I really don't think I would have if I had gotten out of that hospital and everyone just treated me like I was a piece of glass, and that I would have, I'm not me anymore.
It's interesting too. We try to, I try to find research and dig up what I can. You're
Yeah,
a
you've
little
already
more
like said a lot of things. I'm like, wow, he knows his stuff.
no, you have to be a little professional, but no, you were a little tougher because I get it, and I'm the same way. You kind of, keep some stuff to the vest. But I will say, looking at some of the social media pages, you're just as active, having fun with friends, being out there. You wouldn't know from that anything was necessarily wrong. I think that speaks to positivity and still living your life and being fulfilled. And I'm wondering too if it was an approach of taking it one day at a time, not trying to think of the big picture, but still enjoy every day, enjoy the time with your mom, your grandma, and the friends that have lifted you up.
For sure. I mean, I think that that's something that I think can apply to anybody going through any hard time, whether that be like losing a job, losing a loved one, someone going through an injury like me. Um, all you can really do is take it one day at a time. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
I remember that when I was in the hospital, my mom was like, you can be sad for 15 minutes a day. And then after that, you have to figure out like what you're going to be doing next. And like, I think that I'd be lying if I told you that I'm literally only sad for 15 minutes a day. Like, that's kind of insane.
Mhm.
But when you're going through something like that, I think it's good to give yourself boundaries, but to also allow yourself to be upset. I think
Yeah.
sometimes when bad things happen to people, it's so easy for them to be like, oh my gosh, woe is me. And then everything collapses. Or it can go completely the other way where people push everything away or stuff it down and they never process anything. And so I think for me, I was really lucky that I was taught or kind of like enforced or told that it was like, yeah, process your stuff,
Yeah.
but only allow it to be for a short amount of time and then figure out a way to move forward. And I think that's been a great life lesson that I've applied
Yeah.
since then.
Well, it sounds like your mom should have gotten to coaching because there's a
Oh my God, I
sports
would have hated
mentality
that.
there.
No.
Maybe not you, but just in
Maybe
general.
life coaching in certain ways, but
Yeah.
definitely not tennis.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I could see that. So I guess getting into the sports side, when did sports become not only a part of your life, but almost this like saving grace of an activity and a sense of fulfillment, even before you could even get to this point of wheelchair tennis, Paralympic athlete, all this stuff. When did sports re-enter your life after the unfortunate circumstances?
Um, I think that tennis and like sports in general started to enter my life again when I was around like 12 or 13. So my mom, when I was in the hospital, was talking to all sorts of recreational therapists and all these people that come in and speak to you when you're in a pediatric ward. I think they also do that for adults, but especially for kids, they have people that are designed to help you kind of like transition back into the everyday world outside of the hospital. And they were talking to my mom about different sports and different activities. And I'm sure you've seen in some of the other articles that I've done, I was like not into doing any sort of adaptive sports. And my mom was like, no, this is going to be good for you. You're going to do it.
Yeah.
And kind of going on the theme of like mom is always right, I was forced literally by her to go to wheelchair basketball, wheelchair rugby. I went to a all sports camp where I got to try like archery. There was like jet skiing. There was all sorts of stuff. And tennis just happened to be one of those things that I did and ended up being the one that I happened to click with the most. But I think that after, how do I want to explain it? After something happens to you where your independence suddenly disappears,
Hmm.
um, finding sports again, at least for me, gave me that back. I think people don't really realize how designed the world is for an able bodied individual. Everything is designed for people that walk around. So when you suddenly have a disability or are feeling like the world around you isn't designed for you, aka there's stairs everywhere, or do you know what I mean? Things like
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
It's very easy to feel like your independence is completely robbed from you. And that's what happened to me at a very young age. And that's not to say that like everything sucked all the time, but it's difficult. And I
Right.
think playing sports again and seeing like, oh wow, I can move super fast on a court. I can be really strong. I can be part of a team. I can be really good at something athletic,
Right.
was really eye opening for me. And that definitely changed my outlook on not just life, but like on what disability is. I think so many people, myself included, prior to my injury, think that if you have a disability, your quality of life is less than, that you can't be remotely athletic,
Mhm.
that there's no way that if you're in athletics that you could be comparable to any able-bodied athlete that exists, right? And that's like a narrative in our country that I find really unfortunate and is part of the reason why I had the beliefs that I did about disability. Um, but once I found sports, like my ideas were radically changed,
Mhm.
and I think it's been like a blessing and a gift that did happen to me, to be honest.
And I noticed on your website too, it lists, all the accolades and everything you've done. But it also says change agent on there. So that kind of, talking to you for this first, 10, 15 minutes, I'm kind of understanding why that is. This is something that's very passionate to you to not just, find fulfillment in sports with a disability, but also change the narrative and maybe get rid of the stigma of what's out there for non-able bodied people versus, the other side.
100%. That matters to me so much. Like, I can't tell you how many times people will see me at a grocery store or just living my life like the same way that you would. And I get approached with comments like, where's your handler? Why are you doing this by yourself? How could you possibly, be doing XYZ? And I'm like, I'm literally driving a car the same as you do. I'm getting my groceries the same as you do. And I think it's unfortunate that in our country, there's not a lot of representation of people like myself in the mainstream media. Um, and I think, you can't blame the average American for not understanding that people like me exist and that we don't all have mental disabilities and we don't all have, things that really make us so, so, so different from the average person. And for even those that have mental disabilities or what have you, we're really not all that different. And I
Yeah.
think that because of that lack of exposure or lack of ability, a lot of people are afraid. Like people are of course going to be worried or like trepidatious around things they don't know. And so I
Mhm.
totally understand that seeing a younger girl in a wheelchair is like confusing. So people don't always know how to act around me. But I think that one of the things I'm so passionate about is just educating people that, like, I am a person still. You can still talk to me
Mhm.
like I'm a person. You don't have to treat me with kid gloves. You don't have to assume that I can't open a door on my own or that I could never. Do you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think that's such an important lesson for people to understand that people are people, regardless of what they look like, regardless of how they move around. And people just need to like understand like the whole phrase of treat people how you want to be treated. It's so simple, but a lot of people need to be reminded.
Do you see this as a America specific problem? You mentioned that in this country
Yes.
a few times, that phrase. So you think it's a little people are more informed in other countries and
Yes.
more I don't want to say used to it, but just it's more normalized.
Yes, I think that's perfectly said. It's more normalized. I lived in the United Kingdom for 3 years. I was getting my master's over there in London. And one of the things that attracted me to going over there was how they treat disability, whether that be mental, physical, anything. It's very, very normalized in that country, whether it be seeing a person with a disability on a commercial, seeing a person on a TV show, having them be actual celebrities, having them with podcasts, things like that, where it's just like it's normal.
Yeah.
Um, Japan, they're very much the same way. One of the top, he's now retired, but Shingo Kuneda, huge celebrity in Japan, massive. Whereas someone of that level in our country, no one would know who they are. And I think a lot of that is because our country, I always say that our country is the most progressive in terms of physical accessibility. Like we have ramps, we have elevators, we have a lot of things that other countries don't have. But in terms of like being progressive mentally, we are the most behind. And I
Okay.
think that's because our country is so obsessed with these coming from nothing type of stories. So whether that be someone that immigrated here and then came from nothing and now they're like a self-made millionaire, people love that in America because that's like the American dream. And so many times when I do things like this or give other interviews, it's all about how something terrible happened to me and then now look what I'm doing. And I totally understand that. That's my story. It's like a great way to tell who I am, but I think that a lot of times my story is purely just inspiration as opposed to like, no, I'm an athlete, look at what I did.
Right.
And I think in other countries they look at people's disabilities and it's just like a tiny little footnote and it's more about what they're doing as an athlete. A good example is I was watching Great British Bake Off. I don't know if you've seen that show.
Must have missed that one.
Oh my God, I love the British Bake Off show. I think people that listen to this will understand it's great.
Okay.
But they
Okay.
had a girl on there that had missing fingers on her hand. And nothing was said about her having that. It was literally just meet her. This is what she's making today, blah, blah, blah. Whereas if that was in America, you know, they would have done like a 10-minute story on how she lost some of her fingers. It would have been like how amazing it is that she's now on the show. It's like a whole thing like that. And I think that
Mhm.
that's where our country is different.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. There's a lot of narrative pieces out there, and it's not all bad. It's just that's just how it is, and we'll
Correct. It's
see.
not all
Yeah.
bad. And I don't think that it's bad to be an inspiration or anything on that front, but I would like it to not be the only thing that defines people like myself.
More with Dana Mathewson here on Tennis Channel Insight In. I did want to get to your tennis career because from
Sure.
someone that didn't like the game, admittedly, and then became one of the world's best players, I want to know if there was a moment where it all came together or a switch where not only are you into it, but you realized I'm pretty good at this. Like competing with the world's best. Was there a moment, or was it just gradually over time?
I think it was definitely gradually over time. I think I've had a multitude of little moments. Like when I played my first tournament, I remember it was at Irvine Racket Club and I was really young still. I was maybe like 14 or 15. So definitely not competing professionally at that point, just going for fun. And there were only boys in the tournament that I was playing. And I remember I won the doubles and I was like, oh my God, this is cool. I'm like beating up on guys. I'm like winning a tournament. This is cool. And so that was like the first little moment where I was like, okay, I might be good at tennis. And then I remember I was recruited for school at Arizona, and I was like, oh my god, a D1 school wants me to play. That's cool. Maybe I'm good at tennis. You know, like it was like a couple of little
Yeah.
moments, and then I think more recently, or I think once I qualified for my first Paralympic Games, that was really exciting. That made me be like, okay, now I'm playing on like a world stage. That's big. And then more recently, taking the world number one to 3 sets, beating a multitude of the players that are in the top 10. I think I'm slowly having moments where I'm like, yeah, I belong. I definitely
Mm.
belong here. Because I think it's very easy in tennis to have like imposter syndrome, where it's like you have these couple big wins, but you don't always string them together. And it's like, oh, maybe I'm not that good, but I just had a good day.
Yeah.
And recently I've had more and more experiences where I'm like, okay, I'm not just having good days. Like, this is me. I'm doing a good job. And it's been great.
You can have imposter syndrome in a match that you haven't won yet, where
100%.
you're I
Tennis is the worst.
yeah. Can I really do this? Is this gonna happen? I don't know.
Oh
I
my
shouldn't
God.
be doing
Yeah.
this. But there was something else about your bio that I found fascinating. You were described, I think yourself and by other people, as insanely competitive. Would that be
Yes.
pretty accurate to say?
Yeah, it's like it's an asset and it's a flaw, I think. Like, you don't want to play board games with me. Like,
Ooh,
I get so
okay.
into them. Or even like there's this stupid trivia game that they have on Netflix right now, and like you can interact with it and like try to beat your high score, and like every time that I don't get a score that I want, I like keep playing it again and again and again and again, and then I'm like hours are like lost. I'm just really competitive, and I think that that has definitely helped my tennis career for sure.
Are you someone rather that handles losses okay? How does that competitiveness go when you have a tough loss? Is it a process? Are you someone like, don't talk to me for a little bit, I'll be fine a little later? How's that process like?
I'm definitely one of those people that, like, I'm not gonna like smash a racket. I've never smashed a racket.
Yep.
I would be lying if I said I didn't never wanted to, but I've never done it. But I'm definitely the type of person where it's like, don't talk to me for at least like 15, 20 minutes. And then after that, I'm usually fine. But for those first 15, 20 minutes, I don't want to talk to you.
That's understandable. I mean, especially compared to the highest level, there's some toughness there that, people can't relate to when you lose a match of that magnitude. I
Yeah.
thought it was fascinating in reading up and watching on you how the USTA has kind of been that hotbed of training, how you're
Yes.
able to get the development of your game, but also, you're watching film in there, you're really breaking down your game. It seems like, USTA doing a great job with that, but not just for wheelchair tennis, but just for all tennis players, giving them
Yes.
that edge to build up the sport in this country that has had a little bit of a dip in recent years. Seems like it's on the rise all across the board.
For sure. I think that training in Orlando has definitely changed my career path 100%. I've had so much more guidance in areas that I didn't really have guidance before, especially in like the strength and conditioning side. And then definitely in terms of like analytics, like you mentioned. Um, that's something that I know so many tennis players that come to Orlando rely upon. And like, tennis is such a cerebral type of thing. You can get in your own way a lot of times, like over analyzing. And when someone else is doing the analyzing and telling you, like, look, this is when you win 76% of your points, blah, 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 it opens up a lot of doors for you and makes tennis easier in a way. And it's also a
Mhm.
cool environment where you like push each other. Like, I get to say that I train next to Maddie Keys all the time. Or, I've seen Sloane Stevens come to the center. You see a bunch of like our top ranked juniors in the country, and we all like hang out when we're at the site together. We like kind of egg each other on during practice or in the gym. It's a great environment for all of us, I think.
It's exciting to see, and it was, that part of the development that sprung you along. You are the name that comes up first American to do a lot of things. So growing the sport in this country, it's a true thing. Like competing in all four majors, obviously, winning a major title yourself in doubles. But did you have people you were trying to emulate or chase? Because I know it's a little different when you're the first of your country to be breaking these barriers. Did you have influences and tennis idols at all?
Um, I wouldn't say that I ever had like that one person where it's like, you have their poster on your wall and you're kind of like looking to them specifically.
Mhm.
I didn't really have that. I think that it would be wrong not to mention Esther Vergeer, who has like an insane tennis record, wheelchair tennis or able-bodied tennis. Like her win record was like over 1,000 matches or something like ridiculous, and she won I don't know how many Grand Slam titles, and she's just like a freak, and in the best way in terms of tennis.
Right.
And I never really competed against her, but I knew about her even though she wasn't on tour at the same time as me. So obviously, when you think of someone you want to be like, I would think of her. But in terms of me like striving for things. I think I just get pushed by the people that beat me every week at tournaments. You know, you're kind of like,
Yeah.
what does she have that I don't have? Like, I can hit a
Right.
bigger forehand than her. Why is she beating me? Or, oh, she hits that really good drop shot. I need to learn that. I think I was motivated by the people that are surrounding me all the time. And I think that's the beauty of tennis, is that you're never a complete player. There's always something you can do to get better. And I
For
think
sure.
that I focused more on that. And then I've been lucky that those big milestones kind of came along with it.
Seeing Esther Vergeer and Rick Draney had to be cool too. Two wheelchair tennis legends inducted into the Hall of Fame this
Yes,
past year in Newport. You mentioned it. Esther's stats are just ridiculous.
they're
Like, it's just
nuts.
downright stupid what she was able to do. I got to ask you about the Wimbledon run, because some people might consider it the greatest fortnight ever when you throw in an engagement in there. Literally getting engaged the day before you fly out and then winning your first major title.
Yeah.
It has to feel like a floating experience. And I guess the first question would be, when did it sink in? I feel like it would take a while to, is this a dream or
Oh
am
my
I
God.
actually doing this?
It took forever to sink in. I don't think it really sunk in until I got to the media room after winning the match, and they were like, "You're the first American um, female in the wheelchair tennis space to ever win a major." And I was like, "Stop, you're joking." And then they're like, "No, you're the first ever." And I was like, "Oh my God." And even then that didn't really sink in, but it felt like, okay, this is really cool. And then I remember going home back to Orlando, and there were like signs that they put up, and there was like a big party that they threw for me with like strawberries and cream. And I was like, wow, okay. I think it didn't really sink in until then what I had really achieved.
When you're on a run where you're playing with your partner, Yu Kimiji, and you're on this run and everything's going well,
Yeah.
is there a point where you feel like, okay, this is different, this is something special? Like, I know you were at the top of the game and always competitive, but did you feel any signs along the way like this could be a special one?
Um, I knew that I had a really good chance of doing something good. Not really winning, but I knew that I could at least get to a final with Yui. She's such an accomplished player. Um, Someone that unfortunately has beat me many times on the doubles court. But we've always had really good matches. And so to team
Yeah.
up with her, I was like, okay, this is a really good opportunity for you. Like, let's not waste it. And I think at the time in that final, we were playing against a virtually unbeaten pair. The Dutch team had had so many calendar slams together. Like, they're really good. And so I remember during that match, when we won that first set, whether it was like 6-1 or 6-love or something like that, I was like, oh my God, I knew I was leaving today with a trophy, but it might be the big one today. And I think that's when it started to sink in, like during that match. And
Uh-huh.
then, yeah. And beyond that, it just became kind of like a surreal out of body experience.
Well, it's an amazing story. Again, you started off getting engaged, you fly out there, you win. You don't get your strawberries and cream, but we'll get to that
That's
later,
right.
hopefully. Hopefully. And how was the Wimbledon Ball? I'm always asking. I'm always just fascinated by that. It's like a who's who. It's like a secret club.
Do you know what's crazy? And I'm still kicking myself. I didn't go to the Wimbledon ball that night.
Huh.
I had been to
Uh,
it before. So
uh,
my ex-boyfriend plays on the tour, and he had invited me before with him. So I had been. And I think that by the time that we had finished our match, it was later in the day. I had just had dinner. I was like exhausted. And for whatever reason, I just wanted to go home and call my mom and call my family and talk to them. And
yeah,
that kind of mattered more to me in the moment than going to
yeah,
the ball. But when I did go to the ball that one year, that was insane. Like, people dressed to the nines. You're wearing these like flowing gowns. I remember Serena had won it that year. I think, was it Andy Murray? I think it might have been Serena
okay,
and
yeah.
Andy that were
Wow.
there. And you see that, and it's like a very small space. So you are all very much together. And it was an experience I will never forget. It was very cool. And in a way, it kind of makes it really special that I did that the one time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. You got the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool. Did that lead to, I mean, the final note on this is, did that lead to you getting maybe the coolest honor for you and throwing out the first pitch for
That
your
was
San Diego
really
Padres?
cool. Yeah. That was really, really cool to go back to San Diego, where I'm from, and throw out the first pitch with the Padres. As soon as I told my strength coach that I was going to be doing that, he literally had me start throwing, what is it, 60 feet.
Mhm.
We were supposed to like play catch multiple times a week to make sure that I didn't embarrass him and like not throw far enough. So that
Yeah.
was like a whole joint team effort to get me out there and throw a good pitch. That was really fun.
Yeah, we can't have like a Mariah Carey 50
Oh
Cent
my
thing. You
gosh,
gotta
no. Can you
actually
imagine?
that lives forever too. The internet stays undefeated. So
Forever.
yeah, gotta really dig in there. A couple more things here with Dana Mathewson here on Tennis Channel Inside In. You do have plans to eventually retire. I know I got to ask the question. You're still pretty much at the top of your game. Like it's pretty close to career highs. You just won a major. What's the process been like to decide to not obviously retire imminently, but to wind down your professional tennis career?
I think I mean, you're absolutely right. And I do have those thoughts where I'm like, maybe you haven't even peaked yet, you know?
Mm,
Are you sure you want to hang it up? And I think that the main reason that I want to stop playing tennis, and I think a lot of other professional tennis players or people that have been on the tour would understand, is that the lifestyle is a total grind. And so it's not that I don't love the sport. It's not that I don't love competing. I love the training. I'm going to miss all that so much. But
right.
being on the road for 30 plus weeks out of the year, now that I have a fiance at home and I've got, my dog that I got during COVID and stuff, I have things at home that really make me appreciate being home now, where I didn't necessarily have that in the earlier years of my career. And that's definitely made me shift my focus just enough
Mm,
to think about wanting to retire. And then I think that a lot of other tennis players can appreciate the fact that there's a lot of stress with tennis in terms of income. Like a lot of people think that we're all making millions of dollars every year. And I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't doing fine. But there's stress in terms of like, you can work your butt off for weeks and weeks during a training block at home and then show
mhm,
up for US Open and then say your first round is either against someone that's super good and you just happen to lose out, or maybe you play an amazing match but they just play a little bit better and then you don't
right.
make money that you could have made that day. And everything is really performance based and variable, and I think that the older I get, the more frustrating that is to me. And I understand it, that sports, a winner wins and a loser loses, but I think it's tough in tennis that you can still play well and still lose, and that can drastically affect your income, your
Mhm.
ability to pay coaches, etc. And I think that
Yeah.
in the long term, I'm ready to have a little bit more of a peaceful life.
No, I get it, and it's a common theme with athletes, right? You lose that desire to do the things outside of playing your sport, to
Yeah.
go on the road, to be, and look, the train doesn't stop. There's always a new batch of kids coming in that
Yep.
want what you have, and they're always going to compete. And you yourself personally have the accomplishments where you've accomplished a lot in the game. So it's understandable, and I actually do like the way of winding it down, not this sudden I'm going to just retire right away thing,
Yeah,
which I think is,
I don't think I'd be able to do that. I have to slowly say goodbye.
like I mentioned, a lot of accomplishments representing the U.S. in the Paralympic Games is great. A couple of times doing that has been fun to see as well. And it is refreshing. I know we have a long way to go in this country, as we said, wheelchair tennis being on the same level, being looked at the same way. But it's cool to see you as a sponsored athlete having all these opportunities as a result of it. I did want to say the Maestro Double Tequila sponsorship. If you want to send some over here, I can taste
Okay,
taste some of it.
you can send me your address.
Yeah. But it's cool to see this life that you've made through all this, and speaking as well to the next generation, to people that have issues or just want to hear your perspective on things. What message would you have to people that might be starting the journey, a similar journey to the one that you're on?
I think that my message would be that if you're really passionate about something, don't take no for an answer. I know that sounds so cliche, but it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about being stubborn. Like if something really matters to you, you're gonna you're gonna meet some roadblocks. I think what sets apart people that are remembered in history or are, like accomplish big things, it's the people that didn't give up just with any sign of adversity. I would not be talking to you here today if my mentality was to just be like, oh, well, that was kind of hard. I guess I'll just go another route. And
Yeah.
I think that's something I guess you call it tenacity or a whole bunch of other synonyms, but I think that's my advice. Like find something that matters to you and makes you tick, whether that be sports, whether that be, public speaking, or I don't know, maybe you want to start a business, or, it can be anything. And it can be big or small, but if it matters to you, problem solve, find ways to make things happen for you. I think problem solving is a huge thing. Um, make things happen for yourself.
Problem solving in tennis is one of the best features,
It's
doing it in the real
everything.
world. It's so cool to hear. It's so cool to hear you say that, right? Like you could have gone a different direction, had a whole different outlook, and now here you are as a major champion, setting your life up. And again, props. You got a wedding coming up in December, so congrats on that. And
Thank you.
got your got your doctorate of audiology. So I did want to just get your brief thoughts on why did you pick that degree, and what are you hoping to kind of use that for?
So I picked audiology when I started touring colleges. So like I mentioned before, I was recruited from University of Arizona, and I remember on my recruiting trip, I was touring the campus and I saw the speech and hearing sciences building, and I'd never heard of that before. Like it's such a niche major, like most people are like what is that? And my mom was with me on the tour, and my mom is a pediatrician. So I asked her, like, what is that? And she explained like speech pathology to me and audiology. And I actually thought that I wanted to be a speech therapist with little kids, which is why I
Mhm.
declared that major. And then over the course of like, I think it was my fourth year, you have to take classes in both specialties, and audiology just clicked. Like, it's very much goes with problem solving. Like everything is a
Mhm.
puzzle. So like you get presented with a patient, and then there's different tests you
Mhm.
run. And if you get answer A, then you do the next type of test. And I liked that. I liked that you get to work with people. I liked that you could instantly help someone, like all those videos you see where like they're turning someone's
Yeah.
hearing aid on. Like that was my job. Um, so yeah, that's why I picked it. I think it's very mentally stimulating, and there's a lot of problem solving because every patient's different. And then I got to work with people. So it was like a great fit. Weirdly, I'm not sure if I'm going to work in audiology. So
Okay.
um, you're catching me at an interesting time of my life where I, as a type A person, do not know my exact next move, which stresses me out. So I do have my doctorate in audiology, which means that I could go into work in that field, but I'm not sure I want to anymore. I I'm really interested actually in working in the tennis space. So I'm not sure exactly what I want to do in that sector, but I've
Yeah.
had some talks with the USTA. I know that Tennis Channel is out in California where I'm from.
Okay.
I'm really
You can
interested.
put a word in.
I would love to come out there.
Yeah.
I think that as tennis players, we know so much about just one facet of tennis, but there's so much more to it that I find so interesting. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of room for growth in that industry. And I think that's really attractive to me. And so I'm kind of
Yeah.
trying to plant seeds and learn more and kind of see where I end up.
Well, I would say do it while you're still playing because there's this huge bump of people that come here and analyze and then go out and win matches. So that would definitely free scouting, as Shelby Rogers once told me. But no, it's great. And it answered my question too, that you very much seem like you're going to be involved in the game, wanting to keep tennis in your life, which is
Yes.
great. It's been a joy chatting with you. I did want to also shout out someone I spoke to last year because I know you've done some work with her, Vanya King and the Asian American Pacific
Yes.
Islander
Tanya's great.
tennis. Oh yeah, she's great. Very forthright, brutally honest about like her upbringing and everything that happened.
She's awesome.
Yeah. But no, it's awesome. And the last thing, Dana, is just any other personal. I know you're a dog mom. I know you have some of your interests. What other things, as we get ready for this married chapter of your life, what
Yes.
other interests do you have off the court?
Oh gosh, off the court. Sometimes I worry that I'm boring. I'm like, I don't really have a lot of like cool hobbies. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, I come home and I paint waterscapes or whatever. I don't have anything cool like that. I do like to bake a lot. The other day I made
Okay.
pumpkin snickerdoodles and I didn't kill anyone when they tried them, and everyone loved them. So that's a plus. Um,
Yeah, that's well, okay.
I like,
Yeah.
I have a weird love for escape rooms. Does that make me a huge nerd?
No, I don't know if nerd would be the word. Interesting. What is the season? So, um, yeah.
Yeah, I think between me being at training all the time or being on the road, and then being a dog mom to my little dog Riley, a lot of my free time, I'm just like totally lazy, and I binge watch a lot of trash TV. I can say that. Like Real Housewives is my jam.
Okay. Trash, baking, escape rooms. We're peeling back some layers
Yeah,
here.
trash
This is good.
TV. What else do I do? That's probably my main things. That's all you can get for now.
Okay. We'll have to wait a little bit, put some time in to really do it. But in all seriousness, Dana Mathewson, it's been a joy chatting with you, hearing your story, your perspective on things, the amount of change. You are a change agent helping people, see things differently and improve the quality of life for everyone out here. And thank you so much for coming on Tennis Channel Inside In.
Thank you. This was really fun.